Hi, this is week 2, so you'll have assignment 2 and quiz 2 called History and Policy. I'm going to divide this into 2 parts and ask you some questions in between. So I hope this is working for you. It's kind of nice to talk to you versus having you just read a PowerPoint screen. And so hopefully you're getting in the hang of things. The first thing I want to ask you is, how are we going to solve the problem of the demand for forest products and resources with the population growth as it is today? So the first slide talks about there's worldwide reliance on forests and their products today, and this seems likely to continue. Later on this semester, we're going to just talk about forest products, and you'd be amazed how many things are made of wood, and also what the impact on the environment is if we make these things out of different products. So it's called an ecological footprint, and keep that in mind this semester when we're talking about using or preserving the forest. So first of all, there's many different definitions, but let's just start with this. You're going to see this in a couple different assignments this semester. The forest is a complex community of trees, shrubs, other plants, and animals. So it's not just a tree growing in the forest. It might be quite a bit easier to figure out management conflicts if it was that simple. And the study of forestry is an art and a science. And so the art and science of managing forests so as to yield on a continuous basis a maximum quality and quantity to satisfy human needs, or perhaps maybe just to exist, and it doesn't have to be to satisfy human needs. Forests are more than trees. They're a whole ecosystem whose health is reflected in the quantity and quality of water and the biodiversity. So when we're thinking about managing our forests, at the same time we have to think more globally, because we're building 5,000 square foot homes, and at the same time millions of people are still burning wood to cook their food, keep warm, slash and burn forests to produce their food. So we have to keep all of this in perspective. And the reason we talk about history is so that we can learn from the mistakes we've made and make better decisions in the future. So looking at a brief history, there was the broad arrow rule, and kind of my version of this is when England and other countries were exploring, the person with the most ships wins. And so let's look at this for a minute. The historical uses of forests were originally tree-dwelling primates, and then using the forest for food, clothing, and shelter. They also provided food such as nuts, berries, fruits, buds, roots, and game animals. We also used them to make our first primitive tools and for fire. And then we moved into weapons, fortifications, making forts, and naval timbers. And that's what I was talking about, building ships. So other countries came over to our country to use our wood, as they did in South and Central America as well. This historical use of forest has really emerged into a forest that's valued for beauty and recreation, which is changing our management and our values. So we start with the exploitation of the nation's forests, and this quote comes from your book. Once the country was beautiful and rich in resources, but then came the greedy exploiters who raped the virgin land. So let's look at that for a minute. Manifest destiny is the 19th century doctrine or belief that the expansion of the United States throughout the American continents was justified and inevitable. So think about manifest destiny and how those explorers were thinking that our resources at that time were unlimited and there was no harm that could be brought to our country through development. In 1623, we saw our first sawmill in Maine. There was a 250-year market for white pine. 1645, the exports were used to supply timber for the Royal Navy. And 1783 was the Broad Arrow Policy, which was rewritten after the Revolution of breakup of England, and that was the marking of trees to create these ships for the Royal Navy. After that broke up, other laws came regarding fire, trespassing, soil, and erosion control. As we settled the West from 1820 to 1870, the population quadrupled. The domestic market became more important than exports. The first group of land laws allowed families to purchase land. And the second set of laws subsidized public land grants. It was actually Public Land Grant, the Morrill Act, that funded the beginning of Colorado State University, which was an agricultural college, and which is the reason for that big A painted on the side of the foothills. So the Morrill Land Grant Act in 1862 and 1890 were passed to give land to create public colleges. Okay, this was one of the ways to divide the private land into public lands and to fund education. Now, 1933 to 1943, the forests are providing jobs for people through the Conservation Corps, which continued to the 60s and 70s with the Youth Conservation Corps, which continued to existing programs called Outward Bound and Knolls, where we're getting people outdoors so they can enjoy and appreciate our forest, private, public lands, and also have employment. So I think in closing, rather than shaking moralistic fingers, conservation historians would do well to attempt to understand why humans acted as they did toward the environment.